Okay, and we are live. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Kwong. I'm the founder of Add1Challenge, where we add a language together. Today, we have a very special guest, hyperpolyglot Richard Simcott, with us, and he's going to answer some burning questions from participants who are currently in the Add1Challenge. Thank you so much for being with us, Richard.
Well, hello, thank you for having me.
Cool. It's always a pleasure, man.
Yeah, yeah, it's always nice. It's always nice to speak to people.
Cool. Okay, so why don't we jump right in because I know time is precious. Who wants to ask the first question?
Can I ask, do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Wasn't sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. So my question was, I sometimes, hi, Richard. I saw some
Hey.
videos of yours, so it's really nice to see you. I, I sometimes with the languages I study, I have a problem that stuff don't make sense. So I have an example with French, for instance. Psychologically, it's very hard for me not to pronounce half the words. So I find it really hard to pronounce it correctly. I say the words and I think in my head what a complete waste, and and I have that in other languages as well. And I'm sure that in my native language, other people would find some stuff that are like don't make sense.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering if you have stuff like that. You have so many languages that you studied, uh, and like, what do you think when your head always, is against it? Because in French, I'm really, it's very hard. It's like bugging me to see all the ways. So
Okay. So, what can you give me an example of what you're having struggles with? What you're having trouble with in French?
it's just I speak, and then I know that half the word I don't need to pronounce, and I'm saying, so why write it even?
Okay. So it's the
My
sort of the when you're reading it, or when you're speaking just naturally without reading.
It's mostly when I read because then I see the whole word, and so also my French isn't very high. So maybe when you speak it a while, you stop thinking about those things.
I'd say if you're reading it out and you find that you're pronouncing every single letter, um, as you do in languages like Spanish or Italian or Portuguese, or in a way where you know that you pronounce every single thing.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, this
yeah,
is
then I can see why it might be difficult in the beginning. What I can say is it's something that it will get easier if you practice. Some things that you can do specifically is if you have a partner on italki or something similar, then what you can do is actually ask the partner to take a text with you, and you read the text aloud, and then they can correct you every single time you mispronounce or you add additional sounds to a word that are not pronounced in French. And I find that that helps a lot. I went through a similar process not long ago with Russian, where I'd started making my Russian consonant sounds hard, like they are in the Southern Slavic languages. And I went through that process with a Russian native, and I just started reading text, and she would correct me every time, and it's really painful, but it's worth it, and it works. So I'd try that if you get really frustrated, but it's definitely something that goes away.
yeah with time. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So I think her if you answer so that's you answer like kind of like a specific thing, but what if you there's a I think her question is in general if you're dealing with so many language, there are going to be parts of the language that you think it doesn't make sense to you.
Mm.
So there's this annoyance that okay, it doesn't make sense to me. How do you deal with that if you have that annoyance?
Okay.
I think
I
that's
mean, I
what's
mean,
important.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
is that what you meant to say? Okay, so I've answered a specific example, but in general, what I'd say is it's a matter of overlearning. Language learning is overlearning, and you need to have a lot of repetition to be able to do that. So things won't automatically always make sense to you because if there's a new concept in grammar that you've not seen in another language you speak, or if something goes against another language you speak in terms of logic, then you just need to be exposed to it as much as possible and as often as possible so that it becomes more natural in your thinking patterns and in the way you reproduce the language. There are certainly languages, if you go from, let's say, the Slavic groups over to, well, even French, even let's take French and English even, using the definite article. that you're using the definite article in English for certain things, and in French you don't, or the other way around. And that doesn't always make sense until you've really heard it a lot of times. There are certain rules you can learn, but then really it comes with the repetition, I think, more than just the rules in the grammar book.
Do you love all languages, Richard? Is there any specific language that gets on your nerves? Just curious.
A language that gets on my nerves.
Yeah.
Languages can sometimes be frustrating if you're finding it hard to really get to grips with how it works, or an aspect of the grammar, or the vocabulary learning process. Because vocabulary is, I think, probably one of the biggest challenges for most people. I mean, unless you're learning a language that is similar to another language you speak, and where you get a lot of free vocabulary.
How do you do with that?
Learning vocabulary.
But I mean, if it gets on your nerve, how do you how do you do with that?
If it gets on your nerves too much, I'd say don't bother with that language. Because it's probably not. If you're not gelling with the language, you're not gelling with the language. I mean, but there are certainly languages where you want to get past it and you're finding it confusing, and then you can try lots of different things. So you try reading things in context. So learning the words in context often helps, because you then see them in a sentence or in a very familiar construction that you will be able to use over and over again. So that kind of thing can help.
So use different ways. Use different ways to go with.
And learning what works for you at what time in your learning process. So I've had periods of my life where I've actually enjoyed learning related themes of words. So I like learning the parts of the body, and then you can go around all day and just sort of point to yourself and think, okay, you're waiting for the bus. Okay, let's see if I can remember what all the different fingers are called, and the parts of my wrist and arm, and all of these things you can practice.
Mm-hmm.
Colours. I mean, you walk around all day and you see colours and you try and remember the colours, and you make a mental note of the ones that you're forgetting or having trouble remembering, and then when you go back, you write. If you've got something with you, you can write it down, or you can look it up if you've got a smartphone or whatever with you if you have that ability. Otherwise, you just go back home and you study it again, and you keep doing it, and then the next time you go out, you see which ones you remember and which ones you're having trouble with again. Okay. So there are many techniques you can do. One of the other things I like to do is to listen to a language that's above my level, and so I'd maybe listen even to news, or to audiobooks, or to just excerpts from them. I'm not saying just sit there for hours and hours listening to them if you don't understand, because it can be a bit frustrating. Or you go through a newspaper or something and you look for words that are familiar to you, especially in the beginning. So because it really helps to reinforce. Oh, I recognize that word. I know what it means, and you start seeing it in your head, or those kinds of things are good, especially for people who enjoy reading. So there are lots of ways of doing it, really, depending on your learning style and what interests you, what you like. But you always go with what you like. Don't follow one individual because they've managed to learn a language. Everybody in the community learns in a different way.
Yes.
And I think you've got to learn what works best for you and how you can really best tackle your own sort of struggles with the language, or if you like.
That's that's cool. That's cool. All right, let's get another question from the audience. Who wants to ask a question?
May I?
Okay.
Yeah, Lena, go.
I?
Yes, you.
Sorry. My question is, how do you go about similar languages? Like, I know you speak various Slavic languages, and they may have similar words with different stress syllables that can be confusing sometimes. I mean, Spanish and Portuguese in my case. I maybe will be learning Spanish for the next challenge if I figure out how to tackle this problem, because it's like usually a foreign language is completely foreign, and my learning is massive input based. but Spanish, it's like I've tried already. I can talk with the girl in Portuguese, and she responds in Spanish, and we can have a conversation. So I can understand basically everything, and if I don't understand something, a person can type, and I will understand. But I don't know how to learn to talk myself. Thank you.
Okay, so there are a few things that you can do with similar languages. Some languages are very, very, very similar, and for example, I find Norwegian way too similar to Swedish to actually learn it well. I've studied it, and I've studied it to be able to understand, but to actually speak it, I feel like I'm almost making this joke version of Swedish that isn't real or authentic in any way, and so I tend not to. So I just speak Swedish if I'm in Norway. But the thing that I really think that works well is if you know the original language that you're studying from the group very, very well first. So if you feel extremely confident with Spanish that you can manipulate the language, I mean, almost to the level of, sort of C2 plus kind of level, then really from that it's a lot easier to then learn a similar language. Let me give you an example from the Slavic group because you mentioned it. So I speak from the Southeast Slavic group. I speak Macedonian and Serbian, or Serbian-Croatian, and I also learn Bulgarian. But I decided not to learn Bulgarian in the beginning because I found it too similar to the other Southeast Slavic languages, and I thought it would be too confusing. But because my Macedonian is so strong now that actually I find that it's a lot easier to keep Bulgarian apart, and in fact, I can sort of flip backwards and forwards. The only thing I'd say is that if you do learn two languages that are similar, and I've seen this in many polyglots as well, so you rarely meet people who can speak two very similar languages to the same degree. So you may need to content yourself with a level in the other language. So I've not got any pretenses that my Bulgarian will ever be as good as my Macedonian or Serbian because it's simply too close in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. All right, Brendan, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I feel like I've kind of hit a plateau in my language learning, and at the same time, I'm not fully utilizing all the tools available to me. I'm just going over the same like 3 different tools over and over, and I feel like I'm not learning a lot. So I guess my question has 2 parts. How do you get over plateaus, and what do you feel like are the most effective ways besides just speaking with a native speaker to learn the language?
Okay. So Brendan, depending on your plateau where you are, there are different things you can do. So which sort of plateau are you on at the moment? Is it kind of an intermediate or a beginner?
I think a little bit more intermediate.
More intermediate. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are some things you can do to make it a bit more fun. So I'm going to show you now. Just this is an example I have on my phone. This is my new phone, by the way. I'm very proud. I've just joined the 21st century, guys. So
a smartphone, you mean?
Yeah, a smartphone, exactly. So what I have on this, I have an application, which is Euronews. So if you're at an intermediate level, Euronews is really cool because what you can do is this is in French in the beginning, but you choose. So can you see on this very well? Is it difficult?
Yes.
Can you see?
Yeah. What do you want to show us?
So what you do is you select a news, say for example a news program. You watch, and you can click on this to actually hear the news.
Yeah.
And they speak, and they say, well, they have a video as well, obviously like a normal news program, yeah. But they also have the text underneath.
Yeah.
And this obviously is something that's happening in the world right now, so it's interesting. And also, the great thing about it is, this is where it gets exciting, is that you've got the option at the bottom here to choose the language that you want it in. So you have, depending on the language you want, like they've got German, English, French, Spanish, Italian, Hungarian, Portuguese, Russian, Turkish,
Whoa.
Greek, Ukrainian, Arabic, and Farsi, all on one free app that's on the phone. And you can basically watch the same news story in a few different languages. Things like that I find quite interesting when I get bored, or when when I feel that I've got to a level where I can sort of make out a lot of the language, but it's still getting there really. That's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is actually trying to talk to people. At the intermediate level, you should be able to already communicate. So I think seeking out people who can talk to you in the language is a really great way of just developing those skills and really making sure that you feel solid at the level you're at, and then start trying to make them more structured by finding people with similar interests or a topic that you can discuss. So again, you could base it around a news story. Let's say, for example, you want to talk about Ukraine's in the news a lot at the moment. You could talk about something like that. Say, what do you think? Have you seen this? And try and use vocabulary that you see from one of these. Like the Euronews. Euronews has got channels on YouTube, by the way, guys. So you don't even need a smartphone. You can just be on your YouTube channels, and you go to the different languages on Euronews, and you'll see the same. Exactly what I've got on here, but you'll see it on YouTube, and you can just find the text that go with it. I think you probably should find those on the Euronews site, and you'll be able to base conversations around something, and and look for phrases and terminology to just advance your level, to bring it up. But it's a slower process. When you get to the intermediate level, it takes a longer time. So it does require patience.
That's very important.
How do you spell the app?
Euronews. So Euro as in like European. Euro.
Oh, okay.
News.
Euro News. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Okay, great. So let's take a question from the group. She's not here. Okay. This question is from Mag. I'd love to know about mini goals, if you have them. Like, I read a lot about how it's important to set good specific goals, but I don't know what is a good specific goal. So do you have any mini goals? And if you have, how do you set them? How do you recommend to set them?
Well, depending on the level you're at, it's easy. It can be a bit more complicated. I'm completely aware of that. I think in the beginning stages, it can be as simple as, this week I want to learn about the days of the week. This week I want to learn about how to go to the around town and buy things. Next week I want to learn about maybe you do it in the present tense, and then you take the same topic and you do it in the past tense, then in the future tense, or depending on what you need to do and focus on in the language. You've got some languages where tenses are not important, so obviously it'd be a very easy thing to do to do that. But in like the Romance languages, where you have to change the verbs completely, and you have to conjugate for the various past tenses, future tenses, and etc., then that can present its own challenge. So what I'd say is you focus on a part of the grammar that you know is coming up, or that you you need to improve, and you say, okay, what I'm going to do is really get into either the case system, if it's a Slavic language, or a language with a case system, or if it's like the languages with difficult verb conjugations, then say, okay, I want to be able to conjugate so many verbs, and actually test yourself, give yourself mini goals like that. I think one thing that people often beat themselves up over goals and expect way too much of themselves. The fact is, we're human. We all need to eat. We all need to sleep. And don't beat yourself up if you can't learn the entire dictionary in a week. And that's one thing that I notice again and again, not just in the language community, but generally. People tend to beat themselves up because they think, oh, I could do better, and if I'm at full capacity, I could really achieve these goals. Well, it's best to achieve a goal that you can accomplish, and then if you manage beyond that, great. But always take into account that you're human and you've got other things to do, and doing a bit a day will go a long way.
Clear. Doing a day goes a long way for sure. Cool. Awesome. Let's take another question from the audience. Who wants to ask a question?
I won.
Cool. All right. Let's go, Andrew.
Okay, so I'm having an issue right now to where I'm at like a B2 in Italian, and I have to use it for my job at an Italian consulate, but my focus language right now is French, and I'm at like an A2 with that. How do you continue to make progress in both languages without, like, I want to give more focus to French, but I feel like Italian's kind of either slipping or not really going anywhere. How do you maintain multiple languages at the same time?
Okay. You could try, learning or looking at materials from Italian to learn French.
Okay.
If you're worried about that time, that sometimes does help because sometimes it will help you see the differences in the languages as well.
Okay.
So you could, even a site like Duolingo, Duolingo. I mean, some of the translations that they have are not fantastic, to be fair. But you could say that you're doing it French translations from Italian and back again, and that way you're using both languages. You're consolidating your Italian skills in terms of what you've already done a long time ago, but you're improving your French. So it's keeping you sort of on top of both. And then I'd go back to this app that I've just mentioned now. I'd say things like that where you can watch something in both languages is really cool. So for Italian, if you're B2 level, you can be watching the news. At that level, really. B2 is kind of you can be studying in the language and learning things independently in the language. So I'd say that you should be looking at materials written in Italian and making notes on things you don't understand and looking up whenever necessary. But don't get too drawn into every single thing, because if you're reading, sometimes the context will help. If you don't understand the word, see if you go back and read it a couple of times first. If you stall yourself too often, then you break the fluidity of what you're trying to do. It sort of interrupts, and then you're going backwards and forwards to a dictionary when really 3 or 4 read-throughs might actually just resolve that issue.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew, for your question. Okay, who's next?
Okay, I'll ask. How old is your daughter, and how do you teach her languages, and how many languages does she speak?
Okay. My daughter's 7, and she has 5 languages. So first languages are English, Macedonian, and French, and then she's been speaking or learning German and Spanish from the age of 16 months, and she knows bits of other languages too. So she knows a few words in Hebrew and Japanese, and she knows she can understand Italian fairly well. Well, for a 7-year-old, but she can understand quite easily languages that are related. Even Portuguese. I went once with her, and we went into a shop, and she was able to understand a Brazilian I was speaking to, and she asked my daughter a question in Portuguese, and my daughter responded in English, but she responded appropriately, which surprised me because I didn't know that she understood Portuguese.
Does she mix them, or she doesn't?
At 7 now, not really. She did for a while, and that's quite normal. So it's completely fine for a child to mix the languages. Sometimes it's confusing for people around that don't speak all of the languages that the child has, but it's quite funny because they react. Children do tend to react if they see a vacant look from the person they're speaking to, and they realise they can't understand. They will go into the language and find another word. And my daughter has done that in the past when she was smaller, for her grandma who doesn't speak English. She'd say a Macedonian word, well, an English word maybe, with a Macedonian ending or something, and then my mother-in-law would look at you like, I don't know what you're talking about, and then she'd say a different word to explain it. So, but now she's completely fine.
So how did you teach her? How did you bring her? How did you raise her?
How? Oh, I think we've.
Oh no, she probably wanna listen to this.
Okay, so how did we do it? Well, I spoke to her in
How'd you
in
do
a
it?
different, in a very short way of sort of describing this because it's an ongoing process as you can imagine. She's only 7, so she's still learning. And what we've done is we spoke to her in the 3 languages from birth: English, French, and Macedonian from birth. My home language at home with my wife is Macedonian, so we've spoken that all the way through. And then I spoke to my daughter in English and French when she was born until she was 18 months old. And then I switched to speaking only French at home and English she had from outside. And then from...
When you say you speak with her in like 2 different languages, do you like have like an hour one language and an hour to another language, or do you switch? How does it work?
Okay, so when she was a baby,
yeah,
she couldn't really say very much to me. So the thing she was saying was so it was such a little amount of speech coming back from her that you could really just repeat the same things in English and French. So if I were to sing a song in English, let's say for example Twinkle Twinkle, I'll go Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and then I'd sing it in English, and then I'd go Quand trois poules vont au champ, la première va devant, and I'd sing a song with the same tune. It may not be exactly a translation of the lyrics.
Yeah.
You'd hear a song in both languages. So I would do that for all of the nursery rhymes I sang to her until she was, as I say, 18 months old. And I spoke to her in English and French. But when she got to 18 months, and we'd introduced German and Spanish at 16 months, which we did with an hour a day of play, we just play interactive. We interact with each other in the languages. It's not sit down. I don't sit her down and make her do really crazy drills. We just do normal things in German and Spanish, and that's what we've done from the beginning. So first of all, it was playing, and now it's things around the house or outside in the city, and we talk about things in those languages. For French, when she got to 18 months, because she was going to groups outside the house, using her English with other people, I stopped speaking English at home and only spoke French. And then when she was 3, she went to a French school, and then I swapped from French back to English at home.
Nice.
And now she's learning again in English. She's studying English. So I've switched back to French at home, and she has English at school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting. All right. So we have time for one more question. Anybody? No more questions? Okay.
I can ask.
Okay.
I wanted to give other people. It's actually, I don't know if it'll be interesting. I saw a picture of you I think, standing next to the Western Wall in Israel. Have you been? So you speak Hebrew?
I speak a little bit of Hebrew.
You do? It's just...
אבל אני רוצה לדבר יותר טוב. Do you speak?
Yeah, I'm
את מדברת עברית?
Yes, I do. Of course. It's
סבבה.
So it's just not something that I don't know that most polyglots that I kind of see on the internet speak this language, because, well, it doesn't make sense much, because they do speak quite well in English in Israel, right?
Yeah, generally, yeah, but a language is a language, and actually Hebrew is quite fun because it's strange. It's not Indo-European, of course. It's a Semitic language, but it kind of makes sense, and I think it was designed that way to be more approachable for people of Indo-European language speakers when they got to Israel. I think it was one of the things when they redesigned modern Hebrew that they actually looked towards the European languages to do that. And I definitely get that feel when I try and learn Hebrew. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not as good as I wish I was, but yeah, I kind of make myself understood in Hebrew.
Oh, that's cool. Nice.
Yeah, but I mean, actually, just to say, in terms of the community, Alex Rawlings speaks Hebrew. Tim Donor speaks Hebrew.
Okay.
I
don't know enough.
Yeah, I'm not sure who else though. There aren't a huge number. There aren't a huge number that I've met, but there are some out there.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating, guys, and thank you, Richard, for answering our questions.
Yeah, thank
So,
you.
where can we find you, Richard?
You can find me on my Speaking Fluently page on Facebook, which is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Speaking Fluently.
Yeah, I do try and interact as much as I can there. And what is, unlike a lot of the guys out there, this isn't my job, so it's something I do as a hobby, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy interacting with other people, and hopefully helping people a little bit in their language learning as well. So so I do what I can when I can. So never be angry at me if I'm if I don't manage to get back straight away. It's never ever personal.
All right. Okay.
But I do keep on top of my Facebook page pretty well. So you're all welcome there anytime you want to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Richard. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for watching and thank you for participating. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone.
See ya.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Bye.